And we are live. I want to thank you guys for coming back. This is Politics 104. Tale of two speeches. We're going to play some of Donald Trump's speech, which happens to be 2 hours. I'm not going to put you through that. I'm just going to put you through the main portions of actual Trump's speech that he made on January 5th in Iowa before the Iowa caucuses. And then we're going to actually play all of Joe Biden's speech, which is actually 30 minutes long. So that way we can be able to have a response, and then we'll drop the link, see who wants to come up, and then we'll actually respond from there. But for the main portion of the actual speech, before I play it, is I want to play a portion of the speech here, so that way you can understand exactly what we're talking about the J6 personnel. So without further ado, hold on a second. Hold on a second. About him calling these people hostages and all that, which I thought was kind of weird. So without further ado, let's just start playing this portion right here. Fair use, fair use.
Thank you very much. We're going to take our country back. We're going to take our country back. So sad to see what's happening. Hello, Iowa, and very, very happy New Year. We're going to have a great year. Hopefully, it's going to be one of the greatest years ever. You know why? Because in November, it's going to be big. It's going to be bigger than anything that's ever happened to this country. I think it really is of that magnitude, and I appreciate such a big turnout. We come to every little part of this place, and the people are greater and greater every stop, and we want to hit every corner, and we're really honored to see.
Wait, hold on a second. Hold on a second. That's not the one. Let's go to this minute long thing about calling the J6 people hostages. That's what I wanted to get to. Okay, there we go.
It's all going out. You know the steps when you make your speech in front of millions of people and you're making the beautiful speech, looking down to the white. That was one of the great scenes I've ever seen. By the way, I think J6 had an equal amount of people. It's the biggest crowd I believe I ever spoke to. You never hear about that, do you? You have the hostages, the J6 hostages, I call them. Nobody's been treated ever in history so badly as those people. Nobody's ever been treated in our country. But I think that, you know, they always show whatever it was, 1,000 people coming down. Remember the words, march peacefully and patriotically, right? March peacefully. You ever hear Maxine Waters? You ever hear her say about what to do with Republicans? Kill them, go in there. If they're having lunch, go in there. And can you imagine if I said that? No, I said peacefully and patriotically. The whole thing is just very unfair. But those J6 hostages going to jail for 20 years and 18 years and 12 doctors, lawyers, carpenters, electricians, truck drivers. It's one of the saddest things. It'll go down as one of the saddest things in the history of our country. And they went there to protest a rigged election. And now when the facts are in, now they see it is a rigged election. You saw the numbers come out last week. It was a rigged election. And those people have to be, many of them, I guess there's some. By the way, there was Antifa and there was FBI. There were a lot of other people there too, leading the charge. Leading the charge. You saw the.
All right, Mike. Man, it was Antifa and all those people there, wasn't it?
And Big Perm too.
Yeah. Big Perm, it was Smokey, it was everybody was there. I mean, but how many people got actually arrested and charged was actually Antifa or part of the FBI? The answer is nobody. So I don't see how you could just come out and say this kind of stuff and not understand the actual context
Mhm.
that No. Those people went to jail because they broke a law. That's what happened to those people when they went there. Right.
Yeah, and I think that this is just a deflection because he knows that he said that he would pardon all of those people if he becomes president again. Well, what do you pardon them for? If you don't think that they did anything wrong. If it's Antifa, if it's allegedly Antifa, why pardon Antifa?
Yeah. So, so like you had people seeking pardons, actually seeking pardons, and he just left those people out to dry. He pretended like he didn't even know who those people were once they actually got there. He didn't show up to anybody's trial. He didn't try to raise money for these people. Nothing. He hung those people out to dry. That's what happened here. He hung those people out to dry. That's what he did with people who supported him on that day, by the way.
Yeah, and he did not actually, set any bail money aside. He,
No.
he didn't actually, send a kite, what they call, sending a kite, sending a letter, of interest to them. Nothing on that commissary. Some of these people will get in a dozen years. Okay, a dozen. That means they don't get out until like 2036 or something like that. He won't even be in office. He won't even be a concept of a political figure at all. He'll be so far removed. He'll be what? He's 79. So he'll be 79 this year. 12 years from now, he'll be in his 90s. He won't even have a concept of what's going on. And so,
come on, bro.
I don't know. I think it was a black man that got the most amount of time out of
He did.
out of all of them, and so it doesn't pay being a black man on that side, apparently.
Yeah, the Proud Boys leader got a bunch of time too, because they were charged with something different, because they were the actual facilitators and the organizers of the actual people who were actually there. How Robert Stone got out of not getting any time blows my mind.
Roger Stone.
No. Roger Stone. Sorry.
Yeah.
Roger Stone. I don't know how he didn't get caught up in any of this stuff.
Yeah.
But that's what happens, man. They're okay with you. They're okay with you until you actually do something violent and they just walk away from you.
I'm surprised that Roger Stone did not get in trouble for being on probation because he was arrested before. Remember, they had the flashbang grenades and stuff going off to go into his house with a warrant. I would have thought he would have been on probation, and him being at the rally inciting this type of stuff would be a violation of his probation. I don't know how they work that out.
Yeah, what's going on, Erica? Cancel my CPAC ticket this year. Folks can't promote activism but not protecting folks. Yeah, that's crazy. Like most of the party across the country, their coffers are like not running very well because they know that every dime that they put in there, he takes the money and put it in his own pocket. And you can't have somebody who's leading by that amount of percentage points across the country. People are not going to donate money to this cause. I mean, he could probably get by on name recognition, but people are not going to be donating money. Like you don't hear Sheldon Adelson, the Adelson family coming out. You don't hear the Koch brothers. Like the people who are normally institutional investors. The institutional investors in the actual Republican Party across the United States, they're not even investing in the actual process like they used to. They used to be on board. They already got a candidate picked. Like you never see Republican primaries kind of go this far beyond like the Super Tuesday. Beyond Super Tuesday, everybody's out of the race by now. What's going on, go?
Hey, MOT, how you doing? Hey, Mike, what's going on? Great point you're making there. The money is definitely not shaping up. A lot of this is really quietly behind this whole constitutional issue around January 6th and so forth. This former president coming in here, running behind it. Bad for a lot of advertisers. Some are really looking at this. It's a bad look, kind of almost internationally in some ways. This is a problem. The money is not flowing into those coffers currently right now, behind even a lot of these candidates, as you were saying. that's going to be down ticket as well as of course you are seeing and are going to see. This is a problem for the party currently, and they're going to have to sit here and really shake this out. And given some of the other factors we're seeing currently, and I'm going to say this very quickly, I know I get a little verbose, but when we start to look at the employment numbers and some aspects of looking at some of these inflationary numbers, oil prices, gas prices coming down a bit, and so forth, the portents for this, especially early in this year, early in this quarter, doesn't bode well for the opposition from that perspective. So the smart money is going to hedge their bets, I think, more intelligently than emotionally on this. And I think that's what we're seeing. I just think that's what we're seeing. Anyway, go ahead.
What's going on, Renaissance man?
Hey, what's up, panel?
What's going on? You got anything to add, or we're just going to go forward to the middle portion of actual Trump speech and play the last 45 minutes of it? You got anything else before we move forward?
Nah, go for it.
All right. Because he did ramble for quite a while he was up there, but we're just going to play the rest of the actual speech until the end, so that way you can see that, dude, you can't sell doom and gloom, especially with the actual jobs number that came out, which is 200-some thousand, which is pretty high for December, but we have to see
216,000.
Yeah, 216,000. Yeah. Like, I mean, tax cuts matter and work when you're on a winning team, but you can't support somebody like this and not lose face as an actual investor in these type of activities. But let's keep going through this speech.
The other thing to keep in mind too is that the stock market, I believe, is at an all-time high or close to it, as well as consumer sentiment is pretty strong. So going into the new year.
Yeah. All right, so let's just play the rest of this.
Sanctus or Nikki Haley, who both support a 23% national sales tax, which is a disaster. You don't want politicians like Ron and Nikki, who both want to gut Social Security and Medicare, and hurt our seniors. And, you know, if you look at it, Ron voted 3 times to raise the retirement age on Social Security to over 70, and Nikki would take the retirement age to way, way higher than even the number that Ron is talking about. I don't know why they want to do that. You know, we have so much wealth underground. We have so much liquid gold, I call it, underground. You don't need to do this. You don't have to destroy our senior citizens. When we drill, baby, drill, we're gonna make so much money. We'll be supplying the world. Unlike DeSantis and Nikki Haley, will always protect Social Security.
Did he just say that they're going to raise Social Security, and now he's about to say that they're about to cut it?
Also, I think he said that, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe you're allowed to sell like oil on the national market. I mean,
No. Like
before this.
Okay, well, I'll explain that. The oil that is taken out of the ground are natural resources that belongs to everyone within this country. The oil companies go and drill that oil out of the ground for free. They keep the oil and they sell it on the open market. Now, Donald Trump is half right here. If we had nationalized oil, everybody would be getting a check like the people get a check in Alaska every year for the actual oil companies drilling within their actual thing. He's acting like if we drill more, that's going to save Social Security and Medicare. Like, that's never how that works.
And
I don't think you're allowed.
They get subsidies.
No, I think there's also restrictions on selling on the open market as well. Maybe those have been relaxed, but I thought there were some restrictions on oil companies doing that.
No, but the problem is that when it gets pulled out of the ground, the oil belongs to the oil companies. It don't belong to the United States of America. They pay for the equipment, they extract the oil, and they keep it. They don't share the profits with the United States. Well, they kind of do through taxation. But at the end of the day, it's not their oil. It's our oil, like the country's oil.
But they also get subsidies, MOT. And
yeah, that too, on top of that, yeah.
Yeah, so you pay for their equipment, you pay for their leisure, whatever it is, to move it, and then they keep the profits.
Yeah.
And when there's an oil spill or some form of accident, you have to pay for it as a taxpayer.
Yeah, privatize the profits and socialize the losses. That's normally how that.
Yeah,
works.
Yep.
Yeah, I just looked it up. There was a repeal, so there was a ban. It was the effects of
Yes.
the repeal of the crude oil export ban. So this happened in 2020
Yes.
under
Yes.
Trump.
Yes. That's one of the things that he actually did before he actually left office. Which is why there's so much oil being sold on the open market, which is not giving us the rebates that we're seeing now, because it takes a while for the prices to catch up. Oh, they're gonna keep dropping and coming back on.
What's that? I'm
Oh.
sorry. You
All right,
broke up
well,
for.
all right, well, let's keep going with this speech, because that's not true. Like, all that oil just don't belong to the people, and it's not like Norway or Sweden where they actually pay for things in the country with the stuff that they take out of the ground. That's just not true.
Security and Medicare for our seniors. Just remember that when you have to vote. We're going. Although I think, is there anybody in this room that's not going to vote for Trump? Just out of no, don't raise your hand. It could be dangerous. Don't. They're going to say he incited an insurrection. These stupid bastards. He incited an insurrection. No, but is there, quietly raise your hand. Is there anybody here that's not going to vote for Trump? That's very nice. They're upset by even the question. And they're upset. They don't even like that question. Well, I appreciate it. But on my first day back in the White House, I will terminate every open borders policy of the Biden administration. We'll stop the invasion on our southern border and begin the largest domestic deportation operation in American history. We have no choice. We have no choice. Not like we have a choice. I will shift massive portions of federal law enforcement and all of the people working on immigration. You know, they're not even allowed to work. They sign people up and they're brought into the inner sanctums of the country and just leave the border open. They don't even want the border. How about
Wait, pause real
the
quick,
governor of
Moti.
Texas, who endorsed me recently, Governor Abbott, which was a nice.
Yeah, what he's talking about doing, they did this in the 1940s, and crime rates actually spiked because they took all these resources away from fighting crime to actually trying to deport people or put it at the border, and it actually created an issue. Like, this has been done before. And I'm sure people in his cabinet probably know this, and that's why, you know, for all the talk, he actually did not back up a lot of this rhetoric in the first time in office.
Yeah, I mean, and what's going on at the border now is kind of.
Endorsement. He's become much more popular since he endorsed me, actually. But he endorsed me, and they're fighting because the federal government wants to cut the barbed wire. You know, the barbed wire, they call it razor wire, but it's pretty tough stuff. But they have it along the Texas border so that, because Texas is just being inundated. What they're doing to Texas and Arizona is just horrible. And they're in court now because they're cutting. Did you ever see them there with splicers? They're cutting sections. They want people to come out. They're cutting it. And the people are waiting to be let into the country. The whole thing is crazy. And we're not going to be doing that stuff. We're going to be bringing our country back. You know, people say you're conservative. It's not a question of, we're all, I think everybody in this room is the same. We're people of common sense, right? People of common sense. Liberal, conservative, we're people of common sense. I mean, you got to have borders and you have to have honest elections, and everything else is sort of, almost everything else is less important. But you have to have borders if you're going to have a country, and you have to have free and fair elections, which we don't have. We have these mail-in ballot things with thousands and hundreds of thousands in areas are sent out, and we have no idea where the hell they're going and where they.
Washington whole thing is ran by mail-in ballots. I don't think they have the problems that he's actually talking about.
You know, what's interesting is that Obama deported more people than
Far more people.
any other president before him, but he doesn't get any credit for that. He's just seen as this sort of food stamp president, like Newt Gingrich said. And so this idea that we're going to deport all these people, but in reality, you don't really give Democrats or Obama, for that matter, the credit of deporting all of these same people.
That's not the narrative that fits. They want the narrative being the deporters and the money savers and all that, when these are all lies. Trump, in fact, did not, no question about it, did not deport more people than Obama. He certainly didn't. That was never once mentioned during his administration. His administration never admitted, never once, not one time did he admit that. Not once. Others did, but they tried to obfuscate that information. So, I mean, I I don't want to get my personal opinions, but certainly this was probably the worst president that we had seen. But no, as far as when we talk about immigration and deportation, Obama was far more, let's say, efficient at that. I won't say so much better, but efficient at that than certainly the Trump administration was, and that has not been mentioned, not once, not once. And people still believe that he deported more people.
Well, at the end of the day, he's not dealing with the issue. At the end of the day, what really needs to be done is you need comprehensive reform of just the immigration process. Like if you ever go on, like I believe the internet, you probably go search this like a flow chart for immigration, and just like
It's
the
massive.
process and how complex. Yeah, like that has to be reformed. You need more centers to actually process people for like asylum, like those things, the administrative burden. But nobody wants to talk about that. Everyone wants to say, "Oh, these people are showing up at the border, and we should turn them back." And I'm just like, if you want to actually fix this process, like figure out who's approved, streamline the process to come legally, and then you don't give people a reason to just well, I gotta wait 6-8 months to even get a hearing versus like I can just take my chances running across. And you
Yeah,
gotta
and
go
just
after,
and just living off the radar or whatever, and it's like,
yeah, and
I
you
mean,
have to
I,
go
I
after the
would,
businesses if people are as serious about it as they want to, because like that's why Republicans and Democrats, neither one of them touch this issue. Is they know these companies need these employees, whether they be, truth be told, whether they be under the table or not. Like there's just a labor shortage in general, especially in a lot of these red states. Ironically,
yes.
just go to any red state and like look at how many fast food places are hiring, or warehouses or things along those lines. Like there's a labor shortage, and a lot of it is because they actually ran the immigrants out of these states.
Most of these places I go to, you can clearly see those people working at Walmart or Target or in fast food. I mean, they may be white, but they're definitely not American white, not in these areas, and nobody seems to be complaining about it. But that's neither here nor there. I mean, it's only a problem whenever they're black and brown, but if you're European based, nobody seems to really care all that much. Let's go through it.
They're coming from, and they're garbage. Some of them go into the garbage. Yeah, especially if they're Republicans, they put them right into the garbage. No, it's a shame. You'll never have an honest election with a mail-in ballot. Remember that. You never. Jimmy Carter said it. They formed the Carter Commission, and he was there with a couple of other respected senators, older senators, and they came up, and the big point of their report was never do mail-in ballots because you'll never have an honest election. And he said that a long time ago. And France just went to same-day voting, all paper ballots, and voter ID. And they had 36 million people vote for Macron. They voted for Macron just to bring him back, so he's not going to be too upset. No, they voted for Macron. He won the election. And by 10 o'clock in the evening, everybody went home, and they had a real election, They have watermark paper now, which is very secure. They can't really produce it. You can't copy it. It's watermark, because they'll try and cheat there, too. But it's the best system there is. It's really the system that we started with when you get right down to it. But it's better because the paper technology is incredible what they can do. And we'll immediately restore and expand the Trump travel ban for those countries that are terror-plagued and they want to come into our country and hurt our people. We're not going to let them come into our country. They ended that. They want everybody to come in. Come on in, everybody. Come on in. Yes, you killed 9 people, but we think you're going to be much better now. Not one thing has gotten better, if you think about it, under crooked Joe Biden. The country's a mess. We're a laughingstock all over the world. Under the Trump administration, you were better off. Your family was better off. Your neighbors were better off. Your communities were better off, and our country was better off. The whole country was better off. America was stronger, richer, safer, and more confident. And it's not even close. When I was behind the beautiful Resolute desk at the Oval Office, and it is a beauty, I will say, it's no wonder the same corrupt forces that have been fighting us every step of the way are now breaking every rule and shattering every norm in a lawless attempt to keep us from defeating them at the ballot box. Nobody's ever seen what's happened right now. And it's a double-edged sword, It can happen the other way, too. It never happened, the weaponization of justice, like they're doing right now. The DOJ is very corrupt. What they're doing is very corrupt. People aren't going to take it. Joe Biden is a threat to democracy. He's weaponizing law enforcement for a high-level election interference. It's all about election interference. And I don't even know if it's him because I think he's grossly incompetent, but he's surrounded by people that are.
What? Weaponizing the department because you got caught in Georgia? These 91 felony counts has nothing to do with the Justice Department. Somebody had to do those actions in order to get those felonies, man.
This is the most corrupt president we've seen. The most incompetent. Everything he said, every number and every metric that he just mentioned actually went in opposite of what he said. People left with the least amount of confidence. People, he left a pandemic behind him, which while he was in office, you had 500,000 people dead from it, who had died. Many of them who were close family members of ours. So that we're aware of. So he achieved none of this. That's why he's not in office. Of course, he did not have a majority when he got elected. He won it through the Electoral College, but he never won the popular vote. And then when it came to the popular vote and the electoral vote, he lost. But he was sitting here, claiming like he had done a great job. I mean, this is the delusions that these people were actually in. The numbers don't prove it. And that's something that we can easily pull up the record on this.
Oh, and the gone blinked out for a second there. Anybody else before I keep going? All right, well, I'll just keep this going.
They're fascists and communists, and they're vicious, and they're very smart. For example, as I was landing for this visit, I was informed that the corrupt New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, corrupt person, is now and New York is going so bad with the crime, it's like you can't even walk down to buy a loaf of bread. Letitia James, a real...
Hey, pause it there, MOT.
Is now demanding that I pay $370 million in penalties.
This
Yeah,
is
they
the
just talked
same
about-
guy who
Yeah.
said I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it, and nobody would blink it or respond to it.
Yeah. And Letitia James actually went from $250 million in damages because of the way he was running his actual businesses in New York. And now they're seeking $370 million in actual lost revenue and damages that are there. Now, any normal person who does what Trump did for the amount of years that you did it, every loan that you get, that you lie on the application for, that you lie on your taxes for, is considered three things: bank fraud, mail fraud, and wire fraud for every single loan that you receive with fake tax returns. Every single one. I've never heard of anybody going this far into $250 something million because he was overpricing things for years and did not be no real charges over it. Like, they're suing in civil court for this. This should be a criminal trial. This is criminal behavior. Like, I don't understand this. And like, okay, so the trial is going to be ending pretty soon. And the verdict is going to be coming out later on this month. And probably he's going to be suspended from doing business in the state of New York. I'm not sure how they're going to be able to split up the assets and all that, but I don't think he has $250 million or $370 million in cash to just give over. Comments? Okay, no. Let's keep going.
Where I did absolutely nothing wrong. My financial statements, you've been reading about it, are great. They're great.
That's not true. The judge came out and said these financial statements are false for the first beginning of the trial, after the motion was over with. That's what they said before the trial even began.
The man who did the check of the finance said one of the best financial statements I've ever seen. My financial statements are great. And they're very conservative, just the exact opposite of what the highly political and totally corrupt New York State Attorney General was trying to say before she got to see my statements. She ran for office on I will get Trump. Did you ever see her? I will get Trump. I will get him. I'm going to get him. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to get Trump. if a Republican ever said that, they'd have him put in jail for insurrection. She and the judge fraudulently valued Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, which is probably the greatest home in America by far, at $18 million. Now, it sounds like a lot, but it's not, because it was good for their narrative doing that, and it was fraudulent for them to do that, when in fact it's worth 50 to 100 times that amount. We had people come in $1 billion, $1.5 billion, whatever, but it's a very valuable property. They said, the judge said it was $18 million. I had people call up, I'll take 5. They never use the New York State statute. They have a statute that they use. It's vicious, vicious. They never used the statute for this before. I was not allowed a jury. I had no jury. It's up to a judge who comes out of the clubhouses of.
No, here's the thing. Your attorney opted for a bench trial. If you wanted a jury, you would have been guilty. It wouldn't even have taken that long. We wouldn't even be waiting for a verdict or the amount of money that was sought. You actually wanted a bench trial. Most people with money like him, they want bench trials over juries because juries going to look at all the information and they're going to be far harsher on people with these type of penalties and this type of situation, and all the people who testified. There's no way that he's innocent in all this. They're just trying to figure out how guilty.
New York. Think of that. How would you like to be in that position? There was no victim because the banks made a lot of money, good, great loans. The banks testified. In particular, one bank testified, great, everything was great. There was no default, there was no damages, there was no nothing, only a very happy bank that got 100% of its money back, and in addition to getting its money back, made tremendous profits. This case should never have been brought. It should be in the commercial division. The rig judge would not let it go, that he wouldn't allow it to leave his side. He took it, and usually it gets sent in because of its complexity, although it wasn't complex. Because
How do you go to a campaign stop and talk about the trial that you're about to lose? Dude, this is supposed to be about what you're supposed to be doing for the country, not your actual legal stuff that you're actually going through. This is why people are not donating to the campaign, because you're talking about the trial. You're supposed to be running for the president of the United States, not trying to spend your time on a job interview about the president of the United States talking about your actual criminal background. Who does that?
it turned out to be very simple. The statement is phenomenal. They said the best statement he's ever seen, and should have never been allowed to be presented to this judge. It should have gone into the commercial division like all other cases like this, but he kept it, and he's a radical Trump hater. He hates Trump, like with a passion, I guess. I don't know what it is. He has a passion for hating Trump, and I should have never been gagged. They had a gag order. They wouldn't let me talk. I can't talk about certain very important things, much more important than people understand. The judge ruled that
That's not true. You had a gag order because you couldn't threaten the actual members of the actual court while you was actually in trial. That's what you wanted to actually talk about. Again, this is what we're dealing with here.
I was guilty before he even started the case. In fact, I got a call, sir, you've been found guilty. I said, no, the case starts in 2 weeks. I know, but he found you guilty before the case starts. Other than that, it was an extremely fair case. Now the corrupt AG just announced a little while before I walked into the doors. So if you don't mind, I was a little bit angry when I walked in. Did you notice the anger? Maybe not. But the corrupt AG wants $370 million as a fee for what I did, and I did nothing wrong. Nothing. $370 million, which is much more than any loan. Much more. That was peanuts. This is weaponization at a level that nobody's ever seen. So violence is out of control. People are fleeing New York. Businesses are fleeing New York. Car thefts are up 191% in New York. 191%. They should pay me. But it's prosecutorial misconduct, and it's a DOJ witch hunt because it's in total coordination with Biden's deal. So they're charging me $370 million fine for making a very small loan that the bank wanted to make, because that's what they do. They loan money, and they love my state.
No, 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 no. That's not how loans work. All right. You have to go to the bank and fill out paperwork to get a loan. You provided them false and fake tax returns in order so that way you can get a loan. The difference is you were actually overvaluing properties to get the loan, but you were undervaluing properties to get actual tax breaks. That's what actually happened here. Why on earth would you try to relitigate this in front of people on a campaign stop? You're running for president of the United States. Why are you telling us about things that you're actually guilty of that people can simply look up? God, this doesn't make any sense.
Statement that they like me. But I borrowed the money for that reason. The bank wanted me to, but they are in the business of loaning money. That's how they make money. And it was a great loan for them. They got all their money. They actually testified. There was no default during the term of the loan. I actually paid the loan back early. It's a great loan. I'm very underleveraged. We have
The problem is you wasn't supposed to get the loan in the first place. That's almost like saying, you know what? I robbed the bank, but guess what? I went and flipped the money and I gave the money right back to the bank. Hey, everybody, look, you know what? Nobody got hurt. Like, that's not the point. The point was you was never supposed to get this loan based off the fraudulent tax returns in the first place.
great cash, great everything. Built a great company. And these fascists, what they're doing to our country is just unbelievable. So I did nothing wrong. It was in every way, it was like a perfect, the bank was so happy. They testify, no, everything was good. Same thing with every other thing. They were looking at things. $370 million for doing nothing wrong. I took a loan, I paid the loan back, and they charged me $370 million, which I guess is more than 2 times the loan, something like that. But as a very intelligent person just stated on Truth, New York AG Letitia James has decided to increase the amount she wants from Donald Trump in civil trial. Initially, she requested $250 million, and he did nothing wrong. Did nothing wrong. They only want to hurt us because they don't want us running for office, because we're leading Biden, Crooked Joe, by a lot. And this is all this is. This is a terrible intrusion into politics and into our way of life. But now she wants $370 million, and she wants it fast. And it's a disgrace. I've never seen anything like it. I hope everyone can see this for what it really is. This is the gentleman writing. He goes, this is nothing more than a shakedown of a leading candidate of her opposing political party. She thinks she's going to make hay with Washington, but this is a coordination with the DOJ. The DOJ is doing this case with them. In fact, they moved one of the top political operatives from the DOJ in Washington into the DA's office and into also the Attorney General's office. How would you like to be me? You think my life's a lot of fun? Our founding fathers would be turning in their graves if they could see this. No American should be okay with a political party being weaponized against their enemies. This is not democracy, he says. This is not constitutional. This is wrong in every aspect, and the judge and the AG should be arrested and punished accordingly. And how much longer can we allow this to happen in our country? And all of this is being done because we're beating them so badly at the polls. In the new Morning Consult poll, we're trouncing the Republican primary field with Trump at 66, DeSanctimonious at 11, and Haley at 11. That's not bad. You know, we're beating DeSantis in Florida. Poll just came out. I'm at 88. He's at like 11. Because the people got wise to him. I think he screwed up his career pretty good, I'll tell you, but he deserves it. We're also leading big here in Iowa, but again, take nothing for granted. We had the Des Moines Register come out with a great poll recently. They've never been really nice to me. I've always been leading, but I'd end up doing better. But they were respectful. Actually, it's a very professional pollster, the Des Moines Register. But it's amazing. I mean, the numbers have just been amazing in Iowa. The numbers are amazing in New Hampshire. But, you know, polls are they're a little bit like the media. They have polls that lie. They had one poll in New Hampshire where I was only leading by 6 or 7 points. You know, normally you'd be happy, but we're leading by maybe 30 points or something. But that caused a big stir. You know, everybody said, oh, Nikki's doing great, but, you know, it's crooked poll. In the general election, we're crushing crooked Joe Biden by historic margins in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada.
All right, so you get it. At the end of the day, this is supposed to be a job interview for the people of the actual country. You call the January 6 people hostages. Any thoughts so far, Mike?
No, I mean, he's doing whatever he can right now to wade the waters until the party endorses him as the guy. Now what that means for him is he has a position within the party for the foreseeable future, but we don't know what's going to happen when the indictments start to really come down. He still has to go before Georgia. That's you're not getting out of that.
Oh no.
There's no way you're going to get out of Georgia. Now, what happens in that case, I don't know. But his campaign trail, that's pretty normal. I think that's he's going to do what he got to do to stay on the campaign trail, and move the other pawn pieces out the way, like Nikki Haley and Chris Christie and DeSantis out of the way. But you're fighting midgets at this point. Those are just political midgets. They're not really in your way that that much. And so I think that this is pretty normal, well expected.
You go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with Mike. That certainly George is the big piece. That's got to come up. He's doing what he's standard fanfare right now, and doing what Trump does. So no, this is just par for the course currently. Par for the course. But yeah, his biggest trials are yet to come.
Now here's the thing: the polls are saying any generic Republican other than Donald Trump would beat Biden. Any generic actual candidate would beat Biden. So I don't understand how come the party hasn't just moved to another candidate. Like, you're not going to be able to run this guy in the general election. The actual Supreme Court said that they want to actually take up the actual case for the actual trial for the overturn in Colorado and Maine. You have Wyoming as of right now throughout the actual challenge along the same lines. Illinois and Massachusetts just now started their actual attempts to remove Donald Trump from the actual ballot for the same reason that Colorado and Maine did. Minnesota and Michigan kind of punted on the actual question. They didn't make a decision. So I just suggest all blue states start getting them off the ballot, because this is a legislature thing, because it is the states that run the election in that state. So it's up to the actual legislature, the judges in that actual state, and most importantly, the Secretary of State, because the Secretary of State, their job is actually running the actual election within all states within this country. So we're going to go to Biden's speech about what he said at Valley Forge, and that's what we're going to play now, 30-minute speech, and then we're just going to do our reactions after that is over.
Please, thank you. Please, thank you very, very much. Today, the topic of my speech today is deadly serious, and I think it needs to be made at the outset of this campaign. In the winter of 1777, it was harsh and cold as the Continental Army marched to Valley Forge. General George Washington knew he faced the most daunting of tasks: to fight and win a war against the most powerful empire existed in the world at the time. His mission was clear: liberty, not conquest; freedom, not domination; national independence, not individual glory. America made a vow: never again would we bow down to a king. Months ahead would be incredibly difficult. But General Washington knew something in his bones, something about the spirit of the troops he was leading, something about the soul of the nation he was struggling to be born. In his general order, he predicted, and I quote, "With one heart and one mind, with fortitude and with patience, they would overcome every difficulty," the troops he was leading. And they did. They did. This army that lacked blankets and food, clothes and shoes, this army whose march left bloody bare footprints in the snow, this ragtag army made up of ordinary people, their mission, George Washington declared, was nothing less than a sacred cause. That was the phrase he used, a sacred cause. Freedom, liberty, democracy, American democracy. I just visited the grounds of Valley Forge. I've been there a number of times since the time I was a Boy Scout years ago. You know, it's the very site that I think every American should visit, because it tells the story of the pain and the suffering and the true patriotism it took to make America. Today we gather in a new year, some 246 years later, just one day before January 6th. A date forever shared in our memory because it was on that day that we nearly lost America, lost it all. Today we're here to answer the most important of questions. Is democracy still America's sacred cause? I mean it. This is not rhetorical, academic, or hypothetical. Whether democracy is still America's sacred cause is the most urgent question of our time. And it's what the 2024 election is all about. The choice is clear. Donald Trump's campaign is about him, not America, not you. Donald Trump's campaign is obsessed with the past, not the future. He's willing to sacrifice our democracy, put himself in power. Our campaign is different. For me and Kamala, our campaign is about America. It's about you. It's about every age and background that occupy this country. It's about the future we're going to continue to build together. And our campaign is about preserving and strengthening our American democracy. 3 years ago tomorrow, we saw with our own eyes the violent mob storm the United States Capitol. It was almost in disbelief as you first turned on the television. For the first time in our history, insurrectionists had come to stop the peaceful transfer of power in America. First time. Smashing windows, shattering doors, attacking the police. Outside, gallows were erected as the MAGA crowd chanted, "Hang Mike Pence." Inside, they hunted for Speaker Pelosi. The House was chanting as they marched through and smashed windows, "Where's Nancy?" Over 140 police officers were injured. Jill and I attended the funeral of police officers who died as a result of the events of that day. Because of Donald Trump's lies, they died because these lies brought a mob to Washington. He promised it would be wild, and it was. He told the crowd to fight like hell, and all hell was unleashed. He promised he would right them, everything they did. He would be side by side with them. Then, as usual, he left the dirty work to others. He retreated to the White House. As America was attacked from within, Donald Trump watched on TV in a private small dining room off the Oval Office. The entire nation watched in horror. The whole world watched in disbelief. And Trump did nothing. Members of his staff, members of his family, Republican leaders who were under attack at that very moment pled with him. Act. Call off the mob. Imagine had he gone out and said, "Stop." And still, Trump did nothing. It was among the worst derelictions of duty by a president in American history. an attempt to overturn a free and fair election by force and violence. A record 81 million people voted for my candidacy and to end his presidency. Trump lost the popular vote by 7 million. Trump's claims about the 2020 election never could stand up in court. Trump lost 60 court cases, 60. Trump lost the Republican-controlled states. Trump lost before a Trump-appointed judge and then judges. And Trump lost before the United States Supreme Court. All of it, he lost. Trump lost recount after recount after recount and state after state. But in desperation and weakness, Trump and his MAGA followers went after election officials who ensured your power as a citizen would be heard. These public servants had their lives forever upended by attacks and death threats for simply doing their jobs. In Atlanta, Georgia, a brave black mother and her daughter, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, were doing their jobs electing workers until Donald Trump and his MAGA followers targeted and threatened them, forcing them from their homes and unleashing racist vitriol on them. Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, who was just hit with a $148 million judgment for cruelty and defamation that he inflicted against them. Other state and local elected officials across the country faced similar personal attacks. In addition, Fox News agreed to pay a record $787 million for the lies they told about voter fraud. Let's be clear about the 2020 election. Trump exhausted every legal avenue available to him to overturn the election, every one. But the legal path just took Trump back to the truth, that I'd won the election and he was a loser. Well, so knowing how his mind works now, he had one act left, one desperate act available to him: the violence of January the 6th. And since that day, more than 1,200 people have been charged for their assault on the Capitol. Nearly 900 of them have been convicted or pled guilty. Collectively, to date, they have been sentenced to more than 840 years in prison. And what's Trump done? Instead of calling them criminals, he's called these insurrectionists patriots. They're patriots. And he promised to pardon them if he returns to office. Trump said that there was a lot of love on January the 6th. The rest of the nation, including law enforcement, saw a lot of hate and violence. One Capitol Police officer called it a medieval battle. That same officer was called vile racist names. He said he was more afraid in the Capitol of the United States of America, in the chambers, than when he was fighting as a soldier in the war in Iraq. He said he was more afraid inside the halls of Congress than fighting in the war in Iraq. And trying to rewrite the facts of January 6th, Trump is trying to steal history the same way he tried to steal the election. But we knew the truth because we saw it with our own eyes. This wasn't like a story being told. It was on television repeatedly. We saw it with our own eyes. Trump's mob wasn't a peaceful protest. It was a violent assault. They were insurrectionists, not patriots. They weren't there to uphold the Constitution. They were there to destroy the Constitution. Trump won't do what an American president must do. He refuses to denounce political violence. So hear me clearly. I'll say what Donald Trump won't. Political violence is never, ever acceptable in the United States political system. Never, never, never. It has no place in a democracy, none. You can't be pro-insurrectionist and pro-American. And yet Trump and his MAGA supporters not only embrace political violence, but they laugh about it. At his rally, he jokes about an intruder whipped up by the big Trump lie, taking a hammer to Paul Pelosi's skull and echoing the very same words used on January 6th. Where's Nancy? And he thinks that's funny. He laughed about it. What a sick. My God. I think it's despicable, seriously. Not just for a president, for any person to say that. But to say it to the whole world listening. When I was overseas, anyway. Trump's assault on democracy isn't just part of his past. It's what he's promising for the future. He's being straightforward. He's not hiding the ball. His first rally for the 2024 campaign opened with a choir of January 6th insurrectionists singing from prison on a cell phone, while images of the January 6th riot played on a big screen behind him at his rally. Can you believe that? This is like something out of a fairy tale, a bad fairy tale. Trump began his 2024 campaign by glorifying the failed violent insurrection on our Capitol. The guy who claims law and order sows lawlessness and disorder. Trump's not concerned about your future, I promise you. Trump is now promising a full-scale campaign of revenge and retribution, his words, for some years to come. They were his words, not mine. He went on to say he'd be a dictator on day one. I mean, if I were writing a book of fiction, I said an American president said that, and not in jest. He called in, I quote, the termination, quote, this is a quote, the termination of all the rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the U.S. Constitution, should be terminated if it fits his will. It's really kind of hard to believe. Even found in the Constitution, he could terminate? He's threatened the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with the death penalty. Says he should be put to death because the chairman put his oath to the Constitution ahead of his personal loyalty to Trump. This is coming from a president who called, when he visited cemeteries, called dead soldiers suckers and losers. Remember that?
Damn. Damn. Damn.
Sometimes I'm really happy the Irish in me can't be seen. It was right around the time I was at Bo's grave, Tommy. How dare he? Who in God's name does he think he is? With former aides, Trump plans to invoke the Insurrection Act, which would allow him to deploy, which is not allowed to do in ordinary circumstances, allow him to deploy U.S. military forces on the streets of America. He said it. He calls those who oppose him vermin. He talks about the blood of America as being poisoned, echoing the same exact language used in Nazi Germany. He proudly posts on social media the words that best describe his 2024 campaign, quote, revenge, quote, power, and quote, dictatorship. There's no confusion about who Trump is, what he intends to do. I placed my hand on our family Bible, and I swore an oath on the very same steps of the Capitol, just 14 days after the attack on January the 6th. as I looked out over the capital city, whose streets were lined with National Guard to prevent another attack, I saw an American that had been pushed to the brink, America that has been pushed to the brink. But I felt enormous pride, not in winning, I felt enormous pride in America, because American democracy had been tested. American democracy had held together. When Trump had seen weakness in our democracy and continued to talk about it, I saw strength, your strength. It's not hyperbole, your strength, your integrity, American strength and integrity. Ordinary citizens, state election officials, the American judicial system had put the Constitution first, and sometimes at their peril, at their peril. Because of them, because of you, the will of the people prevailed. Not the anger of the mob or the appetites of one man. When the attack on January 6th happened, there was no doubt about the truth. At the time, even Republican members of Congress and Fox News commentators publicly and privately condemned the attack. As one Republican senator said, Trump's behavior was embarrassing and humiliating for the country. But now that same senator and those same people have changed their tune. As time has gone on, politics, fear, money, all have intervened. And now these MAGA voices who know the truth about Trump on January 6th have abandoned the truth and abandoned the democracy. They made their choice. Now the rest of us, Democrats, independents, mainstream Republicans, we have to make our choice. I know mine, and I believe I know America's. We'll defend the truth, not give in to the big lie. We'll embrace the Constitution and the Declaration, not abandon it. We'll honor the sacred cause of democracy, not walk away from it. Today, I make this sacred pledge to you: the defense, protection, and preservation of American democracy will remain, as it has been, the central cause of my presidency. America, as we begin this election year, we must be clear. Democracy is on the ballot. Your freedom is on the ballot. Yes, we'll be voting on many issues. On the freedom to vote and have your vote counted. On the freedom of a choice. The freedom to have a fair shot. The freedom from fear. And we'll debate and disagree. Without democracy, no progress is possible. Think about it. The alternative to democracy is dictatorship. The rule of one, not the rule of we, the people. That's what the soldiers of Valley Forge understood. And so was me. We have to understand it as well. We've been blessed so long with a strong, stable democracy. It's easy to forget why so many before us risked their lives and strengthened democracy. What our lives would be without it. Democracy means having the freedom to speak your mind, to be who you are, to be who you want to be. Democracy is about being able to bring about peaceful change. Democracy is how we've opened the doors of opportunity wider and wider with each successive generation, notwithstanding our mistakes. But if democracy falls, we'll lose that freedom. We'll lose the power of we, the people, to shape our destiny. If you doubt me, look around the world. Travel with me as I meet with other heads of state throughout the world. Look at the authoritarian leaders and dictators Trump says he admires. He out loud says he admires. I won't go through them all. It'll take too long. Look, remember how he refers to what he calls love letter exchanges between he and the dictator of North Korea? Those women and men out there in the audience who ever fought for the American military, would you ever believe you'd hear a president say something like that? His admiration for Putin. I could go on. And look at what these autocrats are doing to limit freedom in their countries. They're limiting freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom to assemble, women's rights, LGBTQ rights. People are going to jail, so much more. It's true, the push and pull of American history is not a fairy tale. Every stride forward in America is met with ferocious backlash many times from those who fear progress and those who exploit that fear for their own personal gain. From those who traffic in lies, told for power and profit. For those who are driven by grievance and grift, consumed by conspiracy and victimhood. From those who seek to bury history and ban books. Do you ever think you'd be in a political event talking about book banning for presidential in the presidential election? The choice and contest between those forces, those competing forces, between solidarity and division is perennial. But this time it's so different. You can't have a contest. You can't have a contest if you see politics as an all-out war instead of a peaceful way to resolve our differences. All-out war is what Trump wants. That's why he doesn't understand the most fundamental truth about this country. Unlike other nations on earth, America is not built on ethnicity, religion, geography. We're the only nation in the history of the world built on an idea. Not hyperbole, built on an idea. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. It's an idea. Declared in the Declaration, created in a way that we've viewed everybody as equal and should be treated equal throughout their lives. We've never fully lived up to that. We have a long way to go. But we've never walked away from the idea. We've never walked away from it before. And I promise you, I will not let Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans force us to walk away now. We're living in an era where a determined minority is doing everything in its power to try to destroy our democracy for their own agenda. The American people know it, and they're standing bravely in the breach. Remember after 2020, January 6th insurrection to undo the election in which more Americans had voted than any other in American history? America saw the threat posed to the country, and they voted them out. In 2022, historic midterm election, in state after state, election after election, the election deniers were defeated. Now in 2024, Trump is running as the denier-in-chief, the election denier-in-chief. Once again, he's saying he won't honor the results of the election if he loses. Trump says he doesn't understand. Well, he still doesn't understand the basic truth. That is, you can't love your country only when you win. You can't love your country only when you win. So I'll keep my commitment to be president for all of America, whether you voted for me or not. I've done it for the last 3 years, and I'll continue to do it. Together, we can keep proving that America is still a country that believes in decency, dignity, honesty, honor, truth. We still believe that no one, not even the president, is above the law. We still believe the vast majority of us still believe that everyone deserves a fair shot at making it. We're still a nation that gives hate no safe harbor. I tell you from my experience working with leaders around the world, and I mean this sincerely, not a joke, that America is still viewed as the beacon of democracy for the world. I can't tell you how many world leaders, and I know all of them, virtually all of them, grab my arm in private and say, he can't win. Tell me. No, my country will be at risk. Think of how many countries, Tommy, you know that are on the edge. Imagine. We still believe in we the people. And that includes all of us, not some of us. Let me close with this. In the cold winter of 1777, George Washington and his American troops at Valley Forge waged a battle on behalf of a revolutionary idea. That everyday people, like where I come from and the vast majority of you, not a king or a dictator, that everyday people can govern themselves without a king or a dictator. In fact, in the rotunda of the Capitol, there's a giant painting of General George Washington, not President Washington. And he is resigning his commission as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. A European king at the time said, after he won the revolution, now's the time for him to declare his kingship. But instead, the mob that attacked the Capitol, waving Trump flags and Confederate flags, stormed right past that portrait. That image of George Washington gave them no pause, but it should have. The artist who painted that portrait memorialized that moment because he said it was, quote, one of the highest moral lessons ever given to the world, end of quote. George Washington was the height of his power, having just defeated the most powerful empire on earth. He could have held on to power as long as he wanted. He could have made himself not a future president, but a future monarch, in effect. And by the way, when he got elected president, he could have stayed for 2, 3, 4, 5 terms till he died. But that wasn't the America he and the American troops at Valley Forge had fought for. In America, genuine leaders, democratic leaders with a small d, don't hold on to power relentlessly. Our leaders return power to the people, and they do it willingly, because that's the deal. You do your duty. You serve your country. And ours is a country worthy of service, as many Republican presidents and Democratic presidents have shown over the years. We're not perfect, but at our best, we face head on the good, the bad, the truth of who we are. We look in the mirror and ultimately never pretend we're something we're not. That's what great nations do. And we're a great nation. We're the greatest nation on the face of the earth. We really are. That's the America I see in our future. We get up. We carry on. We never bow. We never bend. We speak of possibilities, not carnage. We're not weighed down by grievances. We don't foster fear. We don't walk around as victims. We take charge of our destiny. We get our job done with help of the people we find in America, who find their place in a changing world and dream and build a future that not only they, but all people deserve a shot at. We don't believe, none of you believe America's failing. We know America's winning. That's American patriotism. It's not winning because of Joe Biden. It's winning. This is the first national election since January 6th. Insurrection placed a dagger at the throat of American democracy since that moment. We all know who Donald Trump is. The question we have to answer is, who are we? That's what's at stake. Who are we? In the year ahead, as you talk to your family and friends, cast your ballots. The power is in your hands. After all we've been through in our history, from independence to civil war to 2 world wars to a pandemic to insurrection, I refuse to believe that in 2024 we Americans will choose to walk away from what's made us the greatest nation in the history of the world. Freedom, liberty, democracy is still a sacred cause. And there's no country in the world better positioned to lead the world than America. That's why, I've said it many times, that's why I've never been more optimistic about our future, and I've been doing this a hell of a long time. Just to remember who we are, with patience and fortitude, with one heart. We are the United States of America, for God's sake. I mean it. There is nothing. I believe with every fiber there is nothing beyond our capacity if we act together and decently with one another. Nothing, nothing, nothing. I mean it. We're the only nation in the world that's come out of every crisis stronger than we went into that crisis. That was true yesterday. It is true today. And I guarantee you it will be true tomorrow. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
All right. Thoughts on the speech before we go to this last piece? Any thoughts, Renaissance Man?
Yeah. I think he was very authoritative in that speech. It's going to take a lot of that, which I think, this was the first speech where he's really ramped up his campaign versus more of the speeches have been more about governing. But I think it was a good speech, really trying to point out, what Trump is, really trying to remind people as well as paint a contrast. I just think he's going to have to, he's going to have to keep that tone and sound that authoritative throughout the rest of this year, in order to make up for, the slights of people talking about his age and, his cognitive ability, all of those things. He's gonna need to continue to be aggressive and sound and keep that tone.
Yeah. Mike.
No, I don't have anything on that.
Nigel.
Yeah, he did a good job. He defined his opponent, defined him, put him in this box, defined exactly what he was, explained how he was going to be looking to move forward and what this campaign and what this country kind of means to him and what he's supposed to do and move forward. I personally think he pretty much kind of tore Trump out the frame on this. I mean, I think he really he defined him. He defined him as he had to do, and it's a good job.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one person talked about his criminal history and doesn't like the persecution that he's facing when he was about his trials, not really campaigning for president. The other person's trying to stop something bad from happening. All right, so what I have on the screen is Judge J. Michael Luttig of the Republican Party, and this is his actual pedigree. He's a conservative judge on the Court of Appeals. So now we're going to go to an actual interview where he talks about the actual 14th Amendment, because there are still some individuals in the world who think that has to be trial and conviction. So we're going to go to a conservative judge, not liberals, not anything else, but that's where we're at. So we're going to play this, and then we're going to come back after this is over with and discuss after this clip is actually played.
Or rebellion from the time of the framing and ratification of the 14th Amendment. And there were a number of possible definitions. The Colorado Supreme Court wisely chose the narrowest possible.
Okay, let's read the 14th Amendment, Section 3 that's on the screen. No person shall hold any office, civil or military, under the United States who have previously taken an oath as an officer of the United States to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. When you try to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power, this is the actual Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. It doesn't mean that it's left up to the voters to decide whether or not they want an insurrectionist to run. This is self-executing in the Constitution. Self-executing. So I'm going to keep letting this conservative judge tell you.
Of those definitions and said it need not go broader because that narrowest interpretation of insurrection or rebellion would extend to the former president's conduct before, on, and after January 6th.
I don't know how you remember to answer my two questions. I hardly remember that I asked two questions. Your brain is amazing, Judge. Let me ask you about a point that some have made, that disqualifying a GOP frontrunner is anti-democratic, even if it's legally sound. I want to quote from the New York Times, where they wrote, the Colorado Supreme Court's ruling that Donald J. Trump is constitutionally ineligible to run for president again pits one fundamental value against another, giving voters in a democracy the right to pick their leaders versus ensuring that no one is above the law. Mr. Trump's status as the Republican frontrunner for the presidential nomination, despite his role in the events that culminated in the attacks on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, has created severe tensions between those two principles. If the court's legal reasoning is correct, obeying the rule of law produces an anti-democratic result, end quote. You have pushed back on this idea on social media. You think that's not a valid interpretation of what's going on here?
I do not. And the passage from the New York Times story that you just read is just fundamentally wrong. It seems to me that no sooner than had the Colorado Supreme Court ruled than the politicians, but also surprisingly to me and disappointingly, the national media took up the cause of not enforcing the 14th Amendment against the former president, notwithstanding its clear application to the former president because of his conduct around January 6th. That's misleading. And yesterday I tweeted, or whatever one does these days on former Twitter, to address this point because it is of surpassing importance to the resolution of the 14th Amendment question. And I said in that tweet that that it is the Constitution itself, Ali, that tells us that disqualification is not anti-democratic. Indeed, the Constitution tells us that it is the conduct that can give rise to disqualification, namely an insurrection or rebellion. That is anti-democratic. To me, that's about as clear as any document or constitution could make that point. I will say that instinctively, but instinctively only, it is a natural and expected reaction by all Americans, frankly. I would have hoped not by the national media, but by all Americans who are less informed and knowledgeable about our Constitution than the media is supposed to be. But upon thinking about it seriously, I think it's crystal clear, and it will be crystal clear to the American public, that it's the Constitution of the United States that's disqualifying the former president from higher office if he is to be disqualified. to speak to the political warriors, it's not President Joe Biden. It's not the Democrats. It's not the anti-Trumpers. It's the Constitution of the United States. And that's why I've said over the past week that this case tests America's commitment to its own democracy, the Constitution, and the rule of law. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment allows for, and according to the Colorado Supreme Court, requires the disqualification of the president. If he's disqualified, that is the constitutional answer and the law of the land, Ali.
Judge, I want to ask you about an article that was written in The Atlantic by Adam Serwer the other day. It's entitled, "The Colorado Ruling Calls the Originalists Bluff." And it says, there are a lot of practical reasons for opposing Donald Trump's disqualification. One is that it removes the choice of rejecting Trump from the electorate, which might seem undemocratic, even if done with constitutional provisions adopted by the people's chosen representatives. Another is that it could damage the legitimacy of democracy itself by appearing to confirm Trump's allegations that the political system is rigged against him. These are all compelling reasons to avoid or disregard this provision, notwithstanding its plain meaning and intent. A second rejection of Trump at the ballot box seems like the least destabilizing outcome. The problem for a majority of the justices on the Supreme Court is that they're not supposed to care about any of this, to a point that you were just making. They're originalists, remember? You've made the similar argument that based on the plain language of this clause, Donald Trump, by engaging in insurrection, simply doesn't meet this qualification to hold public office again. This is tricky, right? If you're an originalist on the Supreme Court and you say this is what the thing says, then you can't be bothered by the noise outside.
That's true, Ali. I haven't had the opportunity to read Adam's piece, but based on what you said, I would say this, reiterating in part what I've said earlier. This is not politics. This is the Constitution of the United States, and it poses for the Supreme Court of the United States a pure question of constitutional law. The Supreme Court of the United States is never to consider extrajudicial factors or considerations such as partisan politics or even politics writ large. Let alone is it supposed to consider things like have been reported recently in the major media and not reported, urged by the national media, that rather than interpret the Constitution as it's written, the Supreme Court should instead fashion an opinion of statecraft, which is shorthand to those of us in the law, to fashion a result under the Constitution other than the one compelled by the Constitution, Ali.
Judge, I appreciate that you are leaning into helping those of us who are not experts on the Constitution or the law, particularly those of us in the media, to understand this so that we don't sort of circulate the wrong message out there in our soapbox interpretations of these things. We always appreciate your time. I want to remind our audience that you and Lawrence Tribe were on with us on August 19th when you first popularized this idea. You both gave credit to other people who had done some of the work, but you came out here, you wrote an article in The Atlantic, and then you came on here to talk about it. And we appreciate you and your continued service to the country, sir. Thank you.
Seems pretty clear, doesn't it? So, how's it one paragraph is kind of turning into this guy is going to actually be able to run, and it's going to be left up to personnel within the country to decide whether or not they want this guy to be president or not? It was pretty much told you by one of the most conservative judges here about no, he just doesn't qualify. Mike?
No, I think he was pretty clearly stated. Nothing else to add.
Renaissance? Renaissance man?
Yeah. Yeah. Now the thing is, I think you hit it on the head. This is a qualification. Like these people who are making the argument of, oh, well, you're taking, you need to let the voters decide, or you're taking it from the hands of the voters. It's like, okay, if Barack Obama decided that he wanted to run for a third term, like, well, people have been making these arguments about, well, we need to let the voters decide, or, if someone who is not born in the United States was running for president, he will not be saying, oh, the voters need to decide. I mean, speaking of that, everyone made the accusation that Obama, people on the right made the exact accusation that, he was not born in the United States. Like, these people were using that argument and saying he's not qualified to run. They weren't saying, oh, well, we can't take him off the ballot, or you need to let people decide this. Or, if you want someone who's under 35 running for president, it's like, you don't get to like say, oh, well, that's something we need to leave to the people. And, we're worried about democracy and choice. It's like, these are the same people who don't care about voting rights, and are trying to infringe on people's voting rights. But now all of a sudden they're these, big advocates for democracy. So, I mean, like I said, pretty telling that this judge, who is a conservative, as well as you have others, legal scholars who explored this question as well. So yeah, it'll be left up to the Supreme Court and all these people who say that they're originalists of the Constitution and, public perception, all these things, like you said, shouldn't matter. You're an originalist. That's what it stands for. We're going to see if they actually believe in this, or is it just going to be more hypocrisy, which is just going to further be like, okay, these people pretty much just make things up as they go to hold on to power, and they don't believe in any of the stuff that they say they do.
No, but the whole point was they never believed in these things. They wanted you to be held to some type of standard, but once they got in office, they never upheld the same standard. They did whatever they wanted to do once they got there. That is the whole point. So the link is dropped for individuals who actually think that Donald Trump does deserve to actually be on the ballot with the actual conservative judge's actual explanation. Apparently, we have judges around this actual space that don't seem to be wanting to comment on judicial things without here, or lawyers within the space who don't want to comment on judicial things in the space either. But at the end of the day, this is where we're at. So we're going to play, again, another. Go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, no. I think that was. I think the judge was very crystal clear in that. This is a very conservative ruling judge, a constitutionalist, the constitutional judge. There's no doubt, and I think he was very clear. So that's all I have to say about that. I think he was very clear on this point.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a joint thing between two conservative judges and have them explain the actual 14th Amendment, Section 3 to people, because people don't want to read the simplistic paragraph. So we're going to have the judge that we just talked to and another conservative judge do the same thing. We're going to play this, and then we're going to actually see if anybody else wants to come up and actually say anything otherwise. Because at the end of the day, these are conservative judges. These are not liberal judges. These are the conservatives who believe in the actual Constitution as it's written. So let's go on with this.
A remarkably important article that I implore you all to read in its entirety as soon as this interview is over. Because joining me now are the authors of that article. Judge J. Michael Luttig is a former federal judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. Lawrence Tribe is a professor emeritus at Harvard Law School who taught constitutional law at Harvard for roughly 5 decades. He's the author of the influential treatise, American Constitutional Law. Gentlemen, we are so honored to have you here this morning. Thank you for writing what you've written, because through all the indictments, the January 6th indictment and the Georgia indictment, this is the question that most lay people without a legal education ask me. Is there anything in here that stops Donald Trump, who is shooting to the top of the polls literally every time he's indicted, from becoming the president of the United States again? So I put it to you, Judge Luttig. You You have studied this. You have thought about this a lot. You are the man with whom Mike Pence's lawyer consulted before January 6th to make the determination that he was not in a position to overturn the Constitution and count the wrong electoral votes. How have you come to this conclusion?
Thank you, Ali, for having Professor Tribe and I on this morning. Professor Tribe is the most celebrated constitutional mind in America, and he has been that for the past 4 decades at least. Professor Tribe has been studying the Constitution and even the disqualification clause literally his entire illustrious career. I first came to think seriously about the disqualification clause only in January of 2021, after that fateful day of January 6th. But at that time, I came to the same conclusion that Professor Tribe had come to many years before. And Professor Tribe and I have been discussing this profound question between us privately for over the past 2 years. In some ways, one of the most notable things that we say in the Atlantic article this morning is that George Washington, America's very first president, presciently foresaw and anticipated this moment in American history almost 250 years ago in his farewell address. Turning to the merits of what we have explained in this article, constitutional analysis, Ali, as you well know, does not lend itself to sound bites. In this case, though, it does, when coupled with the reading of this article that we've done this morning. And that soundbite is literally that the Constitution in Amendment 14, Section 3, forbids the former president from holding the office of the presidency again because of his conduct in and around January 6, 2021, and specifically in his conduct that either constituted an insurrection against the Constitution of the United States or a rebellion against the Constitution of the United States, or aid and comfort to the insurrection or rebellion that occurred on that fateful day. Under the disqualification clause, the literal terms, the plain meaning, and now we know through the magnificent research of Professors Bald and Paulson, the original meaning of Section 3 disqualifies the former president from ever holding the presidency again, Ali.
And it's not a complicated read. For those Americans who have not had I'm a naturalized American, so when you become a citizen, you get a copy of this, and you can't take your phone into the court. So I've read it several times as I became a citizen. It's 30 pages long. Everybody should just read this. Professor Tribe, in the article you wrote, the former president's efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election and the resulting attack on the U.S. Capitol place him squarely within the ambit of the disqualification clause, and he is therefore ineligible to serve as president ever again. The most pressing constitutional question facing our country at the moment, then, is whether we will abide by this clear command of the 14th Amendment's disqualification clause, end quote. Tell me how this works, because you read it, you two are constitutional experts, I'm not, but we come to the same conclusion. There are a whole lot of people outside in America who are not coming to this conclusion. So who's the one with the authority to say that Donald Trump or anyone who comes up against this clause is ineligible to run for office under the disqualification clause? In other words, who enforces this?
First of all, Ali, thank you very much for having me on this morning. It's an honor to share the stage with my friend and perhaps the most distinguished judge in America, though he does not at the moment serve on the Supreme Court, where I long ago thought he ought to serve. It's an honor to be here discussing this extraordinarily vital question. Now, you put your finger on it. The Constitution says a lot of things, but it takes people to honor it and to enforce it. Now, some people have made the mistake of thinking that the many charges against the current president represent the forum in which all of this will be decided. The 91 pending criminal charges in 4 separate indictments. But in fact, although those criminal prosecutions are terribly important, and it's vital that the president be held accountable and not get away scot-free, the disqualification clause operates all by itself. All of those prosecutions, important as they are beside the point when it comes to this clause. This clause says that no one who did what Donald J. Trump obviously did, and he doesn't really deny it. He plays games with what we call it, but he doesn't deny. In fact, he proclaims proudly that he thinks the electoral count should have been stopped. He still blames Vice President Pence for not overturning the election. Constitution itself says that he can't be president. Now, who enforces that? Well, in the first instance, it is the officials who decide whether his name can be put in nomination. That is, can he run as an official candidate in Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Georgia, any other state? Usually it is the Secretary of State who must make that call, just as he or she must decide if the president is a natural born citizen. You remember that Donald Trump said that nobody should allow Barack Obama to run for president because he was disqualified. Trump didn't suggest that we need a lawsuit to settle that. Of course, he was wrong, and therefore secretaries of state did let Barack Obama run. But when any Secretary of State decides either to put Donald Trump's name on the ballot for President of the United States in 2024, or to keep his name off the ballot, anyone withstanding to challenge that decision, either way, anyone who is harmed by it, a competitor, a voter, will presumably take the Secretary of State to court and say, you did it wrong. This clause of the Constitution doesn't mean what it says, or it was repealed by the Amnesty Act of 1872. There are all kinds of strange arguments people have made in order to make that clause go away. Or they will say, you should have enforced it. You shouldn't have passed the buck. But whichever way Secretary of State goes, that case will go to court. And because the issue is so momentous, it will end up in the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, that court, even though it has leaned in favor of Donald Trump on a number of occasions, has sometimes done its duty. In all of the cases that reached the court in 2020, the claim that the election was a big lie and that states should be allowed to do what the co-conspirators, most recently charged in Georgia, said that should be done, those people were ultimately turned back by the Supreme Court. I apologize for that fire alarm in the background, but I hope it will not hurt anyone's eardrums.
Yes.
I've pretty much had my say.
If it gets louder, Professor, let us know and we'll let you go and get your fire extinguisher. But for now, we hope everything's okay.
Well, it will turn off. It happened once before. It will turn itself off. But I think it is ringing the alarm bell for all of us, because this is a crucial moment for America.
It is, in fact, a metaphor. Judge, in this very clause that you talk about, the disqualification clause, the last sentence says, but Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such a disability. Lawrence William Baude and William Stokes Paulson wrote, quote, Section 3.
That is the last sentence of the actual disqualification clause. A 2/3 majority of the House and the Senate can remove that disability from running for president for that. Nobody in the House or the Senate has done that yet. I think they should do that right away. I think they should get the votes done right away. And so that way we can already have this on count before it even goes to a court. But for some reason, we're not even putting that up for a vote right now. It's either this guy can be or can't be president right now. These legal scholars, one on the left, which is on the right, and one on the right, which is on the left, are in agreement here. What he did there is pretty obvious that this guy can't run for president. Let's keep going. It's not that much longer.
Is self-executing, operating as an immediate disqualification from office without the need for additional action by Congress.
Self-executing, which means Colorado didn't need to bring it up in court, which means Maine didn't need to bring it up in court, even though it was rejected out hand in Virginia and Wyoming, and even though Illinois and Massachusetts are right now trying to bring the issue. This is self-executing. It is unconstitutional to not even have this issue be resolved already. Constitutional law professors, you hear about everybody else but constitutional law professors. Dude on the right, 5 decades, constitutional law professor. Dude on the left, conservative judge. This isn't that hard. But let's keep going.
Congress. And the clause itself says that Congress's only role in this clause is to remove it if they think it's not true. That means it's not necessary for Congress to act to disqualify Donald Trump as a presidential candidate. Is that how you read it?
It is, Ali. That specific finding is perhaps the single most important conclusion that was drawn by the professors from their scholarship, namely that, as Professor Tribe said, the clause is automatic. It is self-executing, which means that, as Professor Tribe just explained, anyone, state or federal, who's charged with listing the candidates for the presidency is obligated under the Constitution to make the decision himself or herself as to whether Donald Trump is qualified to be put on the ballot under the Constitution of the United States. As to the role for Congress, frankly, until this scholarship by the two professors, I was not aware of the self-executing feature of Section 3. I'm sure Professor Tribe was. He's written, thought and written about the disqualification clause his whole life. But this is of momentous significance itself, because neither Congress, nor Congress through impeachment, nor a judicial order, nor the results of a criminal conviction are needed as of this moment under the professor's reading of Section 3 and of my reading and Professor Tribe's. The former president is disqualified from holding the office of the presidency in 2024.
Professor Tribe, you know, on January 7th, I remember having a debate with people about whether this is a coup or an insurrection or whatever that the case is. Interestingly enough, none of the charges, none of the indictments discuss insurrection. It's something the January 6th committee wanted done, but it didn't get done. Given that this clause depends on insurrection, does that have to be proved by a court, or do we believe our eyes and the video and the statements and the Truth Social posts? How is that?
Listen very carefully, because when people say that he has to be tried, convicted, and all this other stuff, you have a person on the right, former appellate judge, person on the left, conservative, person on the right, foremost constitutional expert in the country. They're about to answer this question for you. So that way, when you hear somebody talk about they don't understand how the Constitution works, it's clearly that they didn't read the paragraph or understand the paragraph.
Litigated. How do we make the determination that Donald Trump violated this section of the Constitution by fomenting an insurrection?
Well, the answer is that whoever is responsible in the first instance for applying those words must use his or her own eyes and common sense, and the statements made by the president himself when he was president, and everything we know. When you actually strip away all of the rhetoric and all of the slogans of those who say that the president at the time should not be held responsible, they don't deny the facts. They don't deny the facts that he encouraged those people to storm the Capitol when his plots that we now know about in detail to have fake electors and to pressure the vice president when all of them failed. The facts are all really undisputed. The president's responsibility is there for all to see. A lot of people have become obsessed with criminal trials. It's all over television. You're presumed innocent until you're proven guilty. Yes, he's presumed innocent before we can decide otherwise in a court of law and inflict punishment. But that's why the framers of the 14th Amendment took great care not to treat this as a punishment. It's a disability. They call it that. It is not imprisonment. It's not removal from office and impeachment. Because it is not a punishment, because it is not a deprivation of any right or entitlement. Nobody has a right to be president without meeting the qualifications. It has to be applied in the first instance by an ordinary human being who is then challenged in court. What made you think this was an insurrection? The Constitution uses the term insurrection over and over again to make clear what it means. What it means is an organized effort using all means available, up to and including violence if necessary, to prevent the government from performing its functions for the American people. And one of those central functions is the peaceful transfer of power from one president to the next. So I think that any Secretary of State operating without any partisan motive, whether this was Donald Trump or any other president who did it, would have to conclude this was an insurrection, and at a very minimum, he gave it aid and comfort when he decided to let it continue, when he cheered it on, when he pointed a finger of blame at the embattled vice president in the face of the gallows that had been constructed. He gave aid and comfort to the enemies of the Constitution of the United States. And to put a icing on the top of that rather untasty cake, he said, I would terminate the Constitution if necessary, hold on to power. How can he do that and then take an oath to uphold it? Holding his fingers crossed would not suffice. He is not qualified for the presidency.
Most law students would not have the privilege of having this conversation with the two of you, and I appreciate and am honored by your time. Judge Luttig, anybody who reads both of those indictments will see your fingerprints all over some of the decisions that were made to uphold the Constitution and not overthrow the last election. So we thank you for your service to the country, and of course, Lawrence, your continued analysis that you have provided the American people and many of our law students with over the last 50 years. We are grateful to both of you. I implore our audience to read the article that has just been published this morning. We will, in fact, I'm going to tweet it out right now so that our audience can read it. Judge J. Michael Luttig is a former federal judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. Lawrence Tribe is professor emeritus at Harvard Law School and the author of the book, American Constitutional Law.
Seems to be pretty clear. Who's unclear about what was said? So let me drop the link again. Because apparently there's people within the manosphere who don't understand how clear that was. Here we go. So there should be a bunch of people jumping up on the live stream telling me about how people on the left and the right was wrong. Judge Luttig is on the right, former federal judge, and the dude on the left, foremost constitutional expert, 5 decades of experience. Other than you not understanding what the actual issue is. Mike. Mike, comments? Okay. Renaissance Man, any comments?
No, I think that, like I said, I think both of those break it down. The fact that they went over these people's credentials and that they're saying that, hey, these things are that this is what was meant by it. It's not a punishment; it's a qualification, and that the courts actually have the standing and the body to actually go and execute. It makes it at least open and shut from that standpoint. And once again, the fact that this guy's been studying the disqualification clause his entire legal career or academic career kind of shows lots of expertise here.
I'm not sure how on earth that they would take up the case and not come to the actual conclusion that was actually here. I don't understand. Like I think that by allowing, because we're gonna need predictions from all three of us here. What do you think the Supreme Court's decision to keep them on the ballot or off the ballot, and what's the rationale? Renaissance Man. Do you think they're going to keep them on the ballot or off the ballot? That's the first question. And what rationale that they're going to use for that decision? What's your prediction on that?
I think they are going to try to keep him on the ballot. I think it's going to be a 5-4 decision. I think one is definitely going to break. I think they're going to try to keep him on, but I think they're going to try to I think they're either going to use a justification that that somebody has got to determine that this was an insurrection. I think either that, or I think they're going to try to claim, because I was actually listening to Alan Dershowitz. He's trying to claim Section 5 says it's Congress's role, not the courts, to determine, to make the call, because they're saying that the Congress should have the ability. Now, obviously, that contradicts what he's saying in the segment we just heard. But I think it's going to be two-part. I think they're going to cave. I think they're going to cave to the pressure, even though it's going to look bad. I think Clarence Thomas is not even on the board. I think he's all about putting him back on the ballot. I think either Roberts, like I said, Barrett, or Kavanaugh. I think one of those is going to break and say to take them off, and I think two of them are going to cave to the pressure. They're too worried about the blowback to actually do it.
All right, Mike V. All right, so go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think that they'll definitely keep him on the ballot, but I also think that the reasoning is just because of the legacy of what comes out of this, because this will determine how the country functions going forward, politically speaking, and how often they can get away with this. Because if they keep him on the ballot and this happens again, this also puts egg on the face of the Supreme Court. I don't know if it would have any credibility at that point. I think it loses all credibility going forward. And so I think they're trying to preserve themselves more than they're trying to preserve Trump.
There you go.
They're definitely going to keep him on the ballot. This is very much a political court. You have some people here on this court who I do, Coney Barrett and them, who are not real constitutional justices. Some of these people I question if they're even really that well qualified. You have some who are and some who aren't. I'm not going to get all deep into that. I believe that the decision will be around 6-3, and they will keep this man on the ballot. That's what I believe. I predicted that yesterday. I think we were talking privately, and I'm looking at that. I haven't changed on that at all. That's precisely how I see it.
My prediction is that it'll be 5-4 with John Roberts, the actual head of the court, voting with the 3 liberals on the court. And I think this will still lose Donald Trump the actual election, because after this moment forward, the whole conservative thing had failed at this point. I think that they're going to find a way for this guy to remain on the court. If they're going to relegate it to a 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate, you're not going to get 2/3 of vote for this guy to actually be on the court in the House and the Senate, which is the correct decision, by the way. The correct decision is, you know what? Guy stays on the ballot until there is a 2/3 vote from the House and the Senate. That's what it says in the Constitution as the last sentence of the actual 14th Amendment, Section 3. I'm going to pull that up right now so that way you can understand what it is that these people have. But when does that vote actually take place? I mean, because this is going to take place before the actual conventions. So let's go to section. Because there's a way out of it judicially. Like, personnel are just acting like it's not there, but at the end of the day, it is there. There's a way for him to get out of this judicially by actually 14th Amendment, Section 3. Hold on a second. All right, let's get this on the screen. So you have to read the paragraph because it's only one paragraph, right? One paragraph. And this is what it is. If it's up to it, the last actual part of this paragraph, but Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, may remove such a disability. Okay, this is an excellent question. They can remand it to a lower court. They can't remand it to a lower court because in the Colorado decision and the actual Maine decision, they relegated it up to the Supreme Court to decide whether or not he gets to be on the ballot. Right now, he's on the ballot unless the Constitution says otherwise. If the actual Supreme Court decides that this guy stays on the ballot, I wouldn't even bother debating Trump. I would just say, country's in danger, Supreme Court is corrupt. I'm putting 400 Supreme Court justices on the actual Supreme Court to make sure that this never happens again. I would say 400 judges. 400 that we're going to put on the actual court. At the end of the day, if you can't read a simple paragraph and you're trying to parse that, you heard from a conservative justice and an actual, the foremost expert on the Constitution in the country come together and actually agree that this is what this is. The actual paragraph is self-sustaining. Like when Virginia or Wyoming decided not to even take up the case at all, they violated the Constitution by saying that. The Constitution is very clear about you have to rule on this. But somehow Maine and Colorado decided to follow the Constitution. Michigan decided not to make a decision one way or another. Minnesota didn't either. But at the end of the day, it's self-executing. And the last sentence is a clear ramification of how he can get over the disability. The House and the Senate has to actually vote for this person to actually be on the actual ballot for President of the United States. I am shocked and surprised that nobody has brought that up as a ballot initiative yet. Mike, comments on that. Why haven't anybody brought up that as an actual possibility for the House and the Senate as of yet, for him to be able to be eligible to run for the President of the United States?
Well, look who controls Congress at this point.
Right now, it is the Republican Party.
So that's why.
Right.
So that would answer your question.
Yes, and in the Senate, they're not going to be able to do that either because you need a 60-vote majority to do anything in the Senate.
Yep.
Yep. Renaissance man. I mean, but Mike, aren't there offered aid and comfort to the actual individuals at that point? Aren't they?
Yeah, and that was the whole purpose of them, trying to take, have this big red wave, which turned into a puddle. But that was the whole purpose of them taking over the House was to prevent anything like this to even take place. They're not governing at all. They're ungoverning Congress, and there's pretty much gridlock and everything. And this would actually be gridlock too. And so this is perfect timing for them to be in a position not to actually rule on something like this.
Like I said, people elected the House that they elected, and off ballot circumstances. This is what we got. Renaissance man. Renaissance man seems to be having any complications. They're gone. What do you got? They're gone.
Yeah, quite frankly, I was going to say, if you'd asked me first, I would have said exactly what Mike said. Hit that right on the head. I don't think there's anything else to say, actually, upon that. Look who's controlling the Congress right now. It was designed so they wouldn't have to deal with this. If this did come up, that's where we're at. And that's the bottom line. That's it. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, but I don't understand the actual issue of this. I mean, the paragraph is too simple to understand. I don't understand why it is that people actually think that the guy is going to be able to go through it. Because the only Supreme Court decision out of this is to follow the last sentence. The last sentence is, but the Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 majority in each house, remove such a disability. I think if the Supreme Court actually makes a decision, it has to be the last sentence. I think that it's going to be ruled upon in June or July. The guy's still going to be on the ballot. My personal actual prediction is that this guy is going to relegate that to the actual House and the Senate for a 2/3 majority. That's my prediction. It's going to be relegated to a House and the Senate 2/3 majority. And I would rule that the guy has to be removed. But I understand the non-removal process is to see how many individuals sign up for the aid and comfort toward the enemy portion of it. So it's like, so how far does this go? Do you have to send a whole bunch of congressmen home? Like, that's the whole point here. I don't understand how far this goes. That's where I'm at.
This is a new thing. I mean, we haven't seen this or had to deal with this literally since this whole amendment really came into being based on the Civil War and the end of the Civil War, and seeing to it that no Confederates or Confederate politicians who were holding office in the Confederacy or generals or anything else like that were able to take office. That's the history behind this. Has it been exactly 100% super clear? No, because we haven't had this happened. We haven't really had to really deal with this literally since that time, at over 150 years. So we're kind of stepping on some new ground here. Even though this is really stated in the Constitution, but how are we really going to adjudicate this? You know, to me, it's very clear that this man is without question in violation, and he should not be able to run. But the political aspects that are being played here, and having some Confederates, if you will, still somewhat on this court, I would say, it's very problematic. It's very problematic. So that's why I think they certainly going to keep him on the court, and keep him on the ballot. The court's going to want to do that, and literally, I think they're going to leave it to the people to try to to adjudicate this in the end. It's crazy, but that's what I think. If I understand what's going on here correctly in this country, with certainly this right-wing aspect and where many of these people are, I believe that's what's going to happen. I'm not happy about it, but that's what I think.
All right.
Let me just share my screen real quick.
Share it so I can bring it up.
Let me know if you can see it.
I can see it now. You want to start playing? Let me know where you need to.
Yeah, I'm going to stop playing now.
Great.
This is from this morning.
I worked for the Department of Justice for almost 30 years. I had a 6-week trial, February, March of this year. I represented the first oath keeper to go into the Capitol. I lost, but I can tell you this right now. If this trial's held, the January 6th trial's held in either March, April, or May, or even in August, the evidence against Donald Trump, based on my review of the evidence against my client, who was an oath keeper, the evidence is overwhelming. When Donald Trump gave that speech in front of 15,000 people, not 100 that he said, and he used the word fight 20 times, and he threw in peacefully once, maybe twice, my client and others got the impression, go to that Capitol. You have a mission. And there was violence intended. There were firearms that were brought to Arlington. They were ready for a coup. So anybody who says it's a bunch of terrorists or is peaceful or they didn't intend to cause havoc, they are wrong. Based on my discovery and presentation and experience in the case. Here's the mistake that Jack Smith made. Rodolfo kind of hit on it. You all hit on it. He should have charged insurrection. If you look at the statute and in viewing the evidence in the light most unfavorable to Mr. Trump, he meets every category of insurrection and aiding and abetting. Okay. And that's the only thing I can say is that somebody else should have prosecuted him and indicted him for that. Okay.
Now, let me stop sharing. Stop sharing. Now, he meets all of the criteria. All of the material from the discovery points to the fact that this guy was heavily involved. We haven't even seen any of this. This is new. We haven't even seen any of the discovery. MOT.
But the case haven't come up to court yet. Once this case comes up to court, which is one of the later ones.
No, I'm talking about for the Oath Keeper.
Oh, no. It's like, but that actual evidence is going to be brought up against Trump too.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. It's like he's the facilitator.
Yeah.
Like this is why I said at the first beginning when I did this stream 3 years ago, they're going to charge this as a whole event. Eventually, they're going to charge it as a whole event. If you step past a certain point, you're going to jail over this shit. At the end of the day, Go ahead.
No, and there are actually people in the manosphere who were involved in the insurrection. You haven't seen them in a while. You wonder why. Maybe they've been brought to trial. Maybe they have not been. I don't know. But the evidence, according to Gene Rossi, is so overwhelming. It will be impossible for them not to even convict this guy on this. So I don't know if people are just looking at only the Supreme Court decision in Colorado, because even without that, if it comes down to putting this the discovery on Front Street, they are in some serious trouble.
But the facilitators, but a bunch of different groups got a lot of time for it. They was directed and coordinated with people inside the White House.
Right.
So that's not even something that's even up for debate at this point. At the end of the day, I don't know what they're going to grade it or base it on. I don't know that. At the end of the day, these individuals know damn well what is going on here. They're not stupid. When you have conservatives agreeing with liberals that no, this guy can't be here. I don't understand it, because it says by polling, any generic Republican candidate would beat Biden.
And he said he would pardon, all of these people who have been convicted.
And Nikki Haley said she would pardon Trump if she got elected. How's that not performing aid and comfort thereof? How is that not that? How does that not disqualify her from even being a candidate for this? Even she came out and said it. How is that not aid and comfort? How is it not that?
Go.
Oh no! Just go ahead. I mean, you're absolutely correct. I mean, I have nothing more to say on this. I just look at this as being highly political, and we're going to see some pretty crazy stuff come down. But I've already told you my views on this, Mike. I don't know if you want to expound on it any differently.
There's no reason for this to be even an issue at this point. I mean, the thing is that if you don't think this is the point at the time, like, why aren't you up here defending this actual decision? We had conservatives on, judges, by the way, constitutional professors on, talking about what this issue is. It was pretty clear about what happened. It's just that the actual preponderance of the evidence haven't even became public because the case haven't became public. Like when they was talking about impeaching him for engaging in this issue, we didn't even know the things that we knew now at the time of impeachment. If the Democrats ran the House, they should be able to try to impeach him once again from being able to come back. But the Republicans control the House right now. So they are actually providing aid and comfort to the enemies thereof. And I don't know how any of these individuals can be taken seriously at this point. I just don't know.
14th Amendment, Section 3 speaks directly to this point. Good. This is to knock you out of the box. If you have done that, if you have supplied aid and comfort to insurrectionists. And this goes back to the Confederacy. These guys had the Confederate flag flowing through the Capitol when they were crapping and pissing on the floors and killing police officers and everything else like that. Shit is crazy. Nothing is being, it's almost beyond comprehension. But here we are, and I do believe that they're going to once again keep this savage on the ballot.
I think this is wild overall. I think it is wild that you have no black conservatives yet come out and talk about this issue. Not one. I think that's weird.
I don't think it's weird. I think once again, I think I look at Jay Shine here said the conservatives are ignorant professionals. I'm not going to go through the rest of the comment, but the conservatives, however he states that, I think that however he states that, I think is correct. These people want to, I say, it's out of fear. They believe that they should cut a deal with these far right wingers. In case the worst comes down, where they start to delete their opponents, these guys will somehow be saved. They don't want to be eliminated through this as well. So I think this is the conservatives type of stance that they're taking, siding with this. But this is crazy. But they're not going to come out against this. You're not going to hear them speak on it. Except they should leave it to the people. If anything, you're not going to hear them come up with any countervailing argument to this. You're not going to hear that. Not from them.
It's self-executing. I mean, it's not like the first, the second, the third are self-executing. The 14, Section 3 is self-executing. Self-executing. I don't understand it. It's kind of like we're sitting here, we're talking about an issue, and it's like a lot of these people are like, oh my God, oh, well, it's like, no, this is self-executing. You don't need to vote on this. You need to actually do that the Constitution exists or it don't exist. I think this is a bad deal for the Supreme Court to be in. And if they find a way to keep Trump on the ballot, I think, personally, it's one of the best moves ever by the Supreme Court to prove how corrupt they are. If they find a way to keep this guy on the ballot, it will break all traditions no matter what. And it will prove to you that conservatives who actually voted for the People versus Citizens United, which tried to treat money as speech, as everybody, which money is property. Money is not speech, it is property. I think that them doing something like this should abolish something like the Supreme Court, or add 400 or 500 judges to it to make sure that this type of conservatism never gain a foothold again. The type of conservative Supreme Court who thought that unlimited money is speech for every individual person within the United States is an actual conservatism that we don't need.
We saw Plessy versus Ferguson before.
We did.
Maybe we weren't alive, during that period, but certainly we saw this decision.
We also saw Brown versus Board of Education. We've seen that.
60 years later. 60 years later.
I mean, you can drive by the actual monument, going down I-70. You can see it after you see the actual signs for the actual Jazz Museum and the actual Negro League Museum in Kansas City. You can see, if you keep going down I-70 West, you will see that. You'll see the monument for it. At the end of the day, these people never believed in any of these laws. They expected us to follow them, but they never believed in any of these laws themselves. Period. So I would love for individuals to come up to actually defend what we actually have said here. Because here we actually have open dialogue with individuals that we disagree with. We don't hide behind PhDs of other individuals who's put in work that we haven't put in yet. What we're going to do is we're going to be able to drop the link again. And these individuals can come up and actually tell us what their actual disagreements are based on our analysis today. Because I think fostering open dialogue with things that we disagree with is the best way to do this. Because you're not going to get these open invitations on other channels who actually don't even want to have open dialogue. So anything else before we get up out of here? Before Mike?
Hey, thanks for having me on.
All right. You go.
Great conversation. Thanks for having me on, MOT. Excellent.
No problem. Thank you guys for coming through. 2 Speeches of the Future of America. If you guys have an actual idea of what you're going to think you're going to get out of non-participating, make sure you hit the comment sections and tell us what you want to do. Thank you guys for listening on the Man Tomorrow. You guys have a really nice night. Peace.